Yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, which is on engaging with industry and commercializing research opportunities. I'm Howell Davies. I work across the business engagement team, the sector engagement, and also in terms of developing partnerships, particularly to leverage in funding for business to academic collaborations. I've got a food and drink background, so apologies for any food and drink examples that tend to creep into my presentations. I'll usually end up talking about biscuits and all sorts. We're also delighted to have Nicola McMillan from Scottish Enterprises High Growth Company Creation Team, who will present after me, and we also have Frank Tooley, who'll be on the Q&A afterwards to help form the discussions. We also have my colleague Laura Goodfellow, who has the honour of running the Q&A today as well. This series of webinars has grown in interest over the past 2 years, and we're sitting at over 1,000 academic contacts on that mailing list. We want these webinars to be as interesting as possible, so if you have any suggestions for topics, please do let us know. In terms of this presentation, there is a chat function to post questions during the presentations so that we can get some questions teed up. Laura will be keeping an eye on it throughout. Also, the slides will move on by the presenter. We'll move them on ourselves, so no need to press the arrow and jump ahead, as it does sometimes shift things and you end up out of sync. Finally, from a privacy point of view, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you all post-event. Okay, so just moving on. So I'm going to present firstly, followed by Nicola, but just there's quite a lot of new sign-ups that are now on this webinar who don't necessarily know about Interface. So just to give a bit of context, I'm just going to speak about Interface in the first instance, and then follow us on with talking about engagement with industry, and I'll probably refer more to SMEs, so small and medium-sized enterprises, but we do deal with large companies, social enterprises as well. So it's along the same premise, but sometimes we do have to take a different approach. Right, so Interface, we're supporting knowledge exchange in Scotland. This is underpinned by our mission, which is to enable business academic collaborations for economic and societal benefit. You know, everything our 10 strong business engagement does across Scotland, along with the efforts of our marketing team and also our system and finance team, is aimed at delivering this ambition. So from that point of view, this could be outlined by 5 interlinked priorities that we have. So firstly, it's about inspiring more businesses to partner with Scottish academia, so with the universities, research institutes and colleges. Secondly, it's about escalating and deepening those company partnerships. Also then to accelerate the scale up of businesses through innovation. Thirdly, it's about that enabling that economic and societal impact to transform lives locally and globally. We'll talk about REF later, so things like that actually feed in there. Priority 4 is around using our experience to inform policy and practice in an ever-changing landscape. And then finally, that 5th bit, it's about absolutely everything we do is about being inclusive in our approach. We've been focused over the last 17 years in this area. We are prolific in the number of collaborations we have brokered. You can see the map. We sometimes call this the measles map, so on the left. It gives a really good visual representation of, you know, of all the companies represented that we've somehow helped successfully broker with academia. I think we put this up as much as anything. It's around showing that sort of geography is actually no barrier to businesses of any size engaging with academia. What we find that over 70% of these collaborations happen between companies and academic institutions from different areas. So obviously, you know, it's good to get those local tie-in with businesses, you know, from your own institutions, but actually there's a much wider field, and we are doing more internationally as well. So at some stage we might have a whole globe there. Also as well, you'll notice there are real clusterings there, you know, particularly around Central Belt, Edinburgh, Glasgow. You know, you're finding certain types of companies, you'll find tech companies, so on life science companies, or up the northeast, it might be around engineering, and some of the more rural, it's a different proposition again. We are very much a people, we do take very much sort of a people-led approach. So we do modify our approach, from area to area. So I suppose there's no one size fits all. So this is a slide we use usually it's more about how we sell our services to a business. So a company comes to us, they've got a challenge, they've got a knowledge gap, or they've got an opportunity. They come to us either through our outreach, or they'll come to us through other business support organisations as well, such as Scottish Enterprise, Hive, Business Gateway, or South of Scotland. Also sometimes Chamber of Commerce and that kind of thing as well. They come to us, we help them develop and package and form that idea into an inquiry form. What we also, and I'll talk about it slightly later, we do try and take a step back and understand the actual business needs, because sometimes what people come to us with isn't always what they need. They're very sort of focused in on what they want in the first place. So then we help to package that up into an inquiry form to understand these goals and objectives. This then gets sent out. We do academic search as well. We've done over 6,000 expertise searches. So we've got a massive database of who's out there in terms of, well, both from an innovation active companies, but also then from an academic viewpoint. The amount of I suppose intelligence we have on academics on our database is huge. But I suppose one of the challenges there is that people move on, so on, people's research priorities are changing all the time and all that. So actually putting together this inquiry that goes out, we've got a point of contact within each of the academic institutions. It goes out to them. They then push this out to the across their institutions, and academics give them 2 weeks to come back with an expression of interest, which goes into final findings and then back to the company, and we match in that way. I put a pound sign on the next section. It's not always about funding, it's about that engagement, it's about that relationship, but it's quite interesting. That funding piece attracts companies to us. So innovation vouchers is one of our funding pots that you'll have heard about. We've done it well over 1,000 now since their inceptions in 2008. It's a £5,000 small fund that I suppose acts as a bit of a toe dipping exercise. It helps companies who haven't had funded projects with academia in the past to understand the process, actually start to understand the benefits of working with academia and so on. I really need to sort of mention here that it's less than 20% of our sort of collaborations we broker are innovation vouchers as well. But actually, they're a really important thing in attracting people to have those conversations with us in the first place. And we're looking at probably, it's about 900 to 1,000 business inquiries we get a year. So actually sort of them thinking, oh, great, I can get some funding. And it might not be appropriate in this sense, but actually it gets that conversation going and us understanding who they are and what they actually need. It's also worth mentioning from an innovation, we've got very slick digital operations going on, and our online application process is being rolled out soon to make things more efficient. I think they're currently being trialled with some of the universities. Also as well, we've been successful in the last 2 years in drawing in additional monies from other sources, sort of building on the relationship and the reputation that we do have. So one of these, well, I suppose there's the Advanced Innovation Voucher, previously the Follow-on Innovation Voucher. It's a really good sweet spot. That 10k to £20,000 of funding is a really good sweet spot from taking you from an Ivy in the first instance to larger fundings, and people found it very useful. I've been told to say that actually there is money there at the moment, so get those applications in. It's funded through Scottish Enterprise, so this is actually open to the research institutes as well. And it's also great, we are starting to get some applications in from the colleges. But I suppose what I'd say here is think about it, think in terms of innovation and think what it is in terms of impact for Scotland when you're putting together these applications. We've got the Inward Investment Catalyst Fund for companies out with Scotland. It's a really good fund, really interesting what we find coming in. We're developing really good relationships with Scottish Development International, and we're getting more approaches through their international offices as a result. So the more data and intelligence we have on you and what you can do and what we can actually showcase to these international companies, the more opportunities there are there for you. Interestingly, we're seeing things coming through as well. Through the fund, we're getting academics coming to us directly with the fund that Scottish Development, they're not on Scottish Development's international radar yet. So these are things that we can push. So it's a nice sort of cross referral. One of the current winners, they got 10K award for this. What we really need to see with this application is some thought on what is the roadmap to actually basing some kind of presence within Scotland. So actually the way they're looking at it is they're wanting to do this fund in the first instance, move it on to a knowledge transfer partnership, because they're really serious about showing the credentials to the Scottish National Investment Bank. So that's where they're going with this. They're seeing it as a real sort of pathway to credibility with the SNIB. Interestingly, we're currently waiting at the moment. The Net Zero Fund, that's shut at the moment. There might be more funding in the future, but we're waiting on hearing if there will be one around reformulation in food for health. So watch this space there. So this slide, it's around the academic motivation. This is what we speak to our companies about. They say, well, how do we get the academics interested in working with us? Also helps to actually sort of form that inquiry form in the first instance. And also as well in terms of that triaging piece as well for us, because we get 900 to 1,000 business inquiries a year, and that probably leads to about 400 or 500 expertise searches. So there is a bit of a triaging piece that goes on before you actually see these inquiry forms coming through. There's a bit of research done by David Johnson, who's an academic at Strathclyde. So we've got some academic research done on understanding the motivations and what actually makes a compelling case or a good inquiry in the first place. So the first one there is around sort of what motivates academia. It can inform research, opportunity, pilot research, hypothesis. I sometimes speak to companies, and I think data science and mathematical and statistical modelling is a really interesting one, because I'll talk to companies, go, oh, I've got loads of data. They go, but it's no good because there's so many variances, there's so many challenges around it that no one will want to work with it. But trying to get across to them, will actually know the more variances you have, the more excited and more opportunities there are for some of these academics to test the hypothesis. The same. So we're talking about there about sort of ref, impact examples. We helped set up the Scottish Craft Distillers Association a few years back now, and some of the academics or some of the universities were involved in that. And I've just seen a ref case study coming out now, and the amount of rich material that this university have got because of being engaged with this common interest group, and really sort of working very closely with industry there. It's actually really borne fruit in what they're doing. So there's no rocket science around pulling together that group, but actually the access they then got to the industry partners was incredible. Also talking about there, I suppose that interdisciplinary piece as well. The industry challenges, they don't fit neatly into one area of research, so there's actually real opportunities there from that point of view. I mentioned the case study. I think it's just worth it, and I must say I've got no case studies in this slide, so apologies for that. But I find case studies is a really good way of helping industry understand what you can do, how you can apply some of your research into it. I also find that doing it by sectors as well. So if you're, we split things up by whether it's food and drink, tourism, and so on, and companies understand what other companies are doing within their sectors. So sometimes the language changes from case study to case study. Speaking here then about the teaching side of it, we've recently had a bit of a challenge with it was around IP, trying to get that company to understand the university weren't interested in sort of the foreground IP from commercialising it. What they really wanted was it was actually more about, it was a background IP, it was around using that model they were developing in teaching. So sometimes I think academia baffles industry, but if we can help sort of understand something or help explain some of the context around it. Also talking about student projects, sort of great emphasis and importance is really set on that now. I think the students are a lot more serious about their student projects and what they do. We find sometimes the value of these student projects, they work better than some of the smaller funded projects in terms of developing that journey between the company and the university, because it really helps to create a dialogue with the academic institution. Then we talk about sort of the networks, yeah, as you say, particularly valuable with early career researchers, building those industry networks. My key advice would be to get along to events, join the networks. You know, some of the best opportunities I've had are over coffee at an event. I was actually at something last week, and I chatted to a very casually dressed chap who had his name and it said unemployed under, you know, and it's just written sort of thing. But actually, it turned out then he was on the next panel session about raising investment and was one of the founders of Skyscanner. So you never actually know who you're going to speak to in these things. Obviously, we mentioned from an impact point of view, REF, and that sort of wider impact for economy and societal. And then I've actually just put there, and the societal piece, I know with food and drink, one of the tips I use when I'm talking to companies is actually think about their themes. What are you trying to do? You're trying to reformulate, because actually if it aligns well with, say, sustainability, or if it's around reformulation for health, then actually does it open up opportunities for funding as well. Let's move on. So this is sometimes, I suppose, these are sort of some of the barriers that, or perceptions of it, that SMEs have of I suppose working with academia, and sometimes just that support landscape in general. You know, there is that sort of competing focus and perspective, whether, as you know, with academia, there's, you know, teaching timetables, there's application overload, sometimes it's about the strategic focus of your department, but are there opportunities for others in the department, you know, such as early career researchers who could really benefit from engaging with SMEs? Also find as well, sometimes it's about actually just delivering that clear communication to lay out timelines. You know, actually we're teaching now, but actually in 2 weeks we are freed up in terms of our resource, and managing those expectations from the start. There was this piece around building long-term vision. One good example we have, and case study we've just put out now, a company called Crover. This came out to, they came out to the entrepreneurial piece within Edinburgh University, and the guy has a PhD in granular physics, and it's a robot that he's developed that can move through grain. So he knows what he's talking about in terms of that technology and that side of it. But my colleague went in to sort of show where else we could support them in their journey. And it took, you know, there's a few attempts at it, but it actually took until it was about working with on the risk mitigation side around looking at the insurance models and the value that this technology could have in terms of insuring, you know, the agricultural sector. So that's how we got our way in. But on the back of that, then we've been back in. There's probably about 9 or 10 other interventions. We're kind of acting as a bit of an R&D arm with them in this, which is great. I suppose it's about being consultative as well. We talked about, you know, you hone in on that initial challenge, but actually, you know, take a step back, look at the business as a whole. You know, what are the markets? You know, is there investment going in? Where are the skill sets? You know, what do the operations and processes look at? Because there's so many other things that you could actually start to say, well, you know, we can support you in these areas as well. You know, there's lots of tools out there that you can do for questioning these things. A really useful one, actually, KTN with their innovation canvas. That's something to have a look at as well, because, you know, it helps you to really tease out these things and understand the impact the innovation can have on that business. We did a previous poll in one of these webinars where we looked at whose responsibility is it for following up, you know, post that initial collaboration or that collaboration. And I think the poll that came back was 30-odd% of you thought it was the academic, 30-odd% thought it was the business engagement or commercialization team within the university, and 30-odd% thought it was interface. But I think actually it's, you know, it's everyone's role really to be doing this, to I suppose understand where the wider opportunities sit for your own universities, because fine, we can follow up, but actually that next opportunity might not sit within your university, it might go elsewhere. But also it's a way also as well that you can start to really look at that cross-disciplinary piece as well. Also then as well, in terms of costs and managing expectations, you know, as soon as they sometimes see they've got to be putting cash into the, cash contributions into this, you really need to get them thinking about what's the return on investment, what is the end game. We do have costings in place to mitigate risks. Obviously, the IBs are a great thing to put in place, but things like, get them speaking or understanding R&D tax credits, for example, and really thinking about that return on investment. I know with the knowledge transfer partnerships, where you're looking at, say, 100 to 200k investment for that company, the expectation is in 3 years' time, there's another £1 million within your, on your turnover, I think, or it might even be profit there. So really, it's about sort of demonstrating where that return on investment can come from. Finally, there, I just mentioned about the complicated, cluttered landscape. There is a lot of noise out there. From our own perspective, you look at the ecosystem, the amount of accelerators, got the new tech scales coming in, innovation centers as well. We're taking a sort of approach now where we really want to align ourselves and add value to make the journey for that SME as seamless as possible and make sure that we find them the right support as quickly as possible as well. So I suppose I've been speaking more on sort of the project side and the KE side, and Nicola will speak more on the commercialization side of things. One thing to consider is licensing. It's often the quickest way to take a business proposition to market. Interface hosts universities' licensing opportunities and promotes them to our networks. I think there's currently about 19 opportunities promoted through our website, and we'll send the link afterwards. But Confer, the National Centre for Universities and Businesses, the KE platform there, they host these opportunities on behalf of Interface and promote to their networks. Also as well, while we're talking about tips for commercializing research, and we said about enhancing networking opportunities, we've got the Scottish Knowledge Exchange coming up in March. It's a really good way to build new connections, raise your visibility, meet firsthand others who have made a success of their KE activities. But also as well, there's still applications you can get in. It's a really good way of shouting from the rooftops about some of your successes. Again, we can send a link afterwards. Just as I said at the start, I'm going to pass on now to Nicola. But as I said at the start, what we do is underpinned by our mission, which is to enable business to academic collaborations. We are going through a bit of transition at the moment as we become part of the infrastructure within SFC. And we are trying to develop, or we're looking to develop, what our proposition looks like to add value to the landscape and each and every one of your institutions as well. There is a lot of unseen work that we do that doesn't get highlighted. So just quickly, we work across sectors. For example, in food and drink, we're a touch point there with academia for the Food and Drink Federation in Scotland. We do a lot around intelligence gathering as well. I've been working with Scottish Enterprise recently. They're strengthening their proposals. They're looking to put strategic proposals around sector-specific networks and clusters as well. So, we've got all this rich information that can help make those cases. The more we know about the academic landscape, your research and your interest, the more opportunities we have to direct things your way. As I say, we highlight the funding opportunities, and we're looking to leverage in more funding. That's something we're looking more to do. There is a phrase as well that is becoming more and more, which is around that reverse interface with Interface, where we can highlight the opportunities to academia. We can support academics through their business development teams with industry engagement, and also things like promoting your events, your workshops, and also things like consortia building. Mentioned that this series of webinars, it's really important. We see real value in this. So suggesting future topics are always welcome on this. At this point, I'm going to pass to Nicola, who will take you through taking your research through support with technology readiness, scoping validation, and market understanding. So at this point, I'm just going to pass over to you now, Nicola. Are you okay to
Sure.
take over the sharing the slides? There we go. Thank you.
No problem. Give me 1 sec just till I get everything set up. So while this is hopefully coming through, just thank you to Howell and to Laura and the wider interface team for giving us the opportunity to come and speak to so many academics in the one forum. It's very rare that we actually get access to speak directly to you, so I'm hoping this is going to be of use to you as you understand the potential to commercialise your technology and the research that you're working on. So as Howell introduced earlier on, my name's Nicola McMillan. I'm the team leader of the High Growth Company Creation programme. It's a slight change in name for people who have previously worked with the team, but the High Growth Company Creation team, we manage the High Growth Spinout programme. But what it didn't do was reflect the wider activity that we do in this wider commercialisation landscape. So we've widened it out and broadened it so that potentially you understand what the purpose of the team is to go out there and it's to create companies that are going to have that disproportionate effect on the economy. So for those of you that don't know Scottish Enterprise, we're the Economic Development Agency for Scotland and we support companies to grow and develop to benefit the economy. So we work across big themes such as innovation, investment and international. But uniquely, where we sit, we actually address all of those themes. All of the companies that we create should have that innovation driven element to it. They're generally going to be disruptive to the market. They are generally going to be looking for investment at scale, both nationally and internationally, and they will be international from day one. The markets will always be overseas for the types of companies that we are looking to create. And the High Growth Services team, which encapsulates not just the spinouts, but all the way up to that kind of wider scale up space. So we offer a unique joined up approach that supports the business from its conception through all its stages of its journey to add value to the business. And by definition, as I said earlier, it's usually disruptive to the market, highly innovative and looking to scale. So the company creation team sit at the very earliest part of that pipeline, and I can talk you through then what we do in the slides that follow. So for those of you that have heard of the High Growth Spinout programme before, the whole kind of raison d'etre of the High Growth Spinout programme is to create high growth investment ready spinout companies from Scotland's academic research base. And I certainly don't need to tell you about the quality of the research base that we've got here. And from a Scottish Government led approach, how do we get more value into the economy from that world class research? We punch way above our weight in terms of the number of publication and the impact that we've got from our university research. But how do we translate that into a company setting and get the benefits from an economic development perspective? So we're looking for projects at the TRL stages, kind of 3 or 4. So proof of concept established, it's been validated within the laboratory, and you've maybe done some preliminary activity where you have spoken to potential customers, interacted with them, understood what their marketplace looks like. And we're also looking at projects that are in sectors that support our national programmes, and I'll talk about that in the next slides. But really, what we're committed to looking at is companies that are going to achieve success and that've got that ambition to raise seed investment by 12 months post spin out. What's important to note here is it's not just the universities that we work with, but the research institutes and also the NHS. And we're hoping to identify academic teams that have that ambition to create that disruptive high potential opportunity, and we can help them become that scaling business of the future. So I thought this was kind of useful from an academic to understand where we sit and the future direction of travel from a Scotland perspective as far as the technology themes that we're looking for. So alongside the 4 strategic themes that you can see in blue across the top, we have these 7 national programmes, and I appreciate the kind of the names of them are particularly woolly, but actually when we kind of start to kind of look underneath the bonnet of them, um, we have the academic expertise in Scotland to address some of the opportunities that they present. So historically, the High Growth Spinout programme has been very life sciences focused. I think we can look across every year for the last 20 years, and it's been kind of 60–70% of the projects that we work with are kind of drug discovery, pharma related projects, maybe some strain into the medtech space. But a key priority for us is to not move away from that, but to understand what opportunities we have within the base that could support the creation of companies that will address some of the other strategic challenges. And the one that over the past probably year to a year and a half that's come to mind is that hydrogen economy. So with the academics groups in Scotland, what offering do you have that's sitting in your toolbox that actually potentially has the opportunities to become a company that is going to address some of those key issues that we've got in kind of creating a kind of greener future for Scotland. And not only that, but trying to pivot away from single university projects. Do we have a collaborative opportunity within Scotland where the hydrogen economy issue could be looked at? Do we have something, hydrogen storage, for example, or hydrogen transport? How do we kind of develop that, and how do we actually understand what opportunities we've got in the research base that are potentially going to address that in a company format? Some of you that might be quite eagle-eyed out there and know the programme, we also have an open call at the moment, kind of coming out of the post-COVID economy, for a digital health and wellbeing. So taking lessons learned from the pandemic and ensuring that we're using some of the experience within the NHS and university collaborations kind of to serve the population better. So what opportunities do we have within the research base right now that could address some of that health for wealth issue, and how we can kind of make Scotland a kind of a healthier place to live. So they're the kind of the core strategic themes and the core technology areas that we're looking at. That's again not to say that we wouldn't look at opportunities that exist out with that, but the majority of the funding that we've got available to us will be spent within those 7 national programme areas. So moving on to the programme and more specifically at this point in time, again, as I said, the purpose is to commercialise Scotland's research strengths, and to generate companies that are capable of achieving 5 million turnover or £10 million of external inward investment by year 8. So that's technically looking at it'd be quite hard to kind of go and raise £10 million worth of investment kind of solely in Scotland. So that's where the international element comes from it, how we can kind of grow businesses that are attractive to international investors. We focus, as I said, on the universities, research institutes and NHS. And over the past couple of years, we have really increased the amount of projects that we're looking at through the NHS and the collaborative approach, but also looking at how the research institutes can work with the universities again on that collaborative approach to bring projects forward to us, and we can help commercialise. The bare minimum from a project perspective that we would look at is a 3 or a 4. So again, as I said, that lab validated, and there are other mechanisms out there in the ecosystem that can help you get to that level. So it's not a research grant. That's one thing I kind of want to make clear. It is not just kind of blue sky thinking. There has to be a commercial output from it. And as I said, a strategic fit with the national programmes. What we're looking for you is a plan that outlines all those key activities. So what's it going to take for you to get to the concept all the way through to kind of get into that spin out and raise an investment, a milestoned approach to the programme, and we can help fund that commercialisation activity. Probably the main thing for me is a team that's committed to the spin out success, and how the HGSP programme can actually help you build that team, and looking at then at that investment raise with that commercially minded team kind of within 12 months of the spin out. And we've got 3 levels of support. We've actually got 4 levels of support, but one of them isn't kind of financially available. So we've got a 75k grant, which kind of helps you scope the opportunity, a 200k grant to get you to the point of investment, and a £400,000 equity-based support mechanism through a convertible loan, that's potentially kind of going to bridge that gap between the investor being interested to the investor actually signing on the dotted line. I'll go into that in a wee bit more detail. So as I said, this is the journey that we expect you to go on, and this bit at the very early stage of it is probably the most important part of it, that relationship management that we've got with the universities. So the team is split up geographically to deal with each of the universities and research institutes in turn, and that's how we develop our pipeline. We don't ever get projects that come to us where a university hasn't been involved in the first instance, and that collaborative approach to development supports the university, and it helps us to actually get applications in that are appropriate for the milestones that we're looking for. But also it helps us kind of get to know the academic teams, and that's our single most important thing, is that you understand us and we understand what you're looking to achieve. So that's a really iterative process in the beginning. It doesn't matter kind of the state that it comes to us in the first instance. We will work with you to develop the proposition, get you ready for that application phase, and to help you understand if there are missing gaps, what other support is available, but also to basically create an application that's going to succeed in getting you through all the different iterations of the spin out process. Moving into that kind of project implementation, the 2 funding mechanisms we've got, as I mentioned before, the opportunity qualification and the company creation. The timelines are shown on the screen, and then that early company growth through the convertible loan note. So I'm going to take each of these in turn now and kind of explain a little bit more about what we do. So for opportunity qualification, the name really says it all. So it's understanding beyond your lab validated product, does the opportunity hold any commercial value? So we would expect you to kind of have at least a basic understanding of what that commercial value is, that you have potentially spoken to customers through your partnerships and collaborations, that you've potentially got a customer that's interested in what you do. But it's really kind of getting to the point of if that kind of converting that customer from interest to actually kind of paying you the pounds for the product ultimately at the end of the day, but also how you translate that technology to a market ready product. So we have a toolkit based approach. You can see that in the green. These are all the different elements that we would support. And what's important to know at this opportunity qualification stage is you don't need to know the answer to everything. That's the purpose of it, is to actually take these in turn and say, do we know what the health economics are surrounding our proposal? If it's a no, fine. As long as you recognise that, we can help support you by putting funding into that health economics journey and actually understanding at the end of the opportunity qualification, do we have a project that can then go on to the next iteration, basically, of support? So this is about the proof in the pudding, getting you to the point where a company creation grant is eligible for you. Um, so moving on into that, and this is where the kind of like the meat is. So this is the big £200,000, no more than 18 months kind of from spin out at this point in time. And this is really about putting the bells and whistles onto your commercial plan. So within this, we do have some funding available to you to actually get the technology to a point where there's an inflection point that an investor will invest in at this point in time, and that a customer is almost willing to say, yes, this is kind of ready for us. Appreciate at this point in time, if you're a life sciences project, if you've got clinical trials, etc., it's probably the preclinical phase of it that you're looking to get to at the end of this grant. So this is slightly different to the opportunity qualification in that it's competitive and it's submitted 3 times a year. So we have open calls for this 3 times a year, whereas the opportunity qualification is opened all year round. And only the top scoring applications will be funded. But again, that goes back to that relationship management element of it. If we know in advance what the opportunity is, we can help work with the academic teams to actually deliver an application that is probably going to pass muster at that point in time. And it's important to note then that after the company creation grant is completed, the expectation is that you should be ready to spin out. That, however, is not always the case. And some of the feedback that we get from investors is actually for some of those technology intensive development projects for the likes of hydrogen, energy, life sciences, etc., there might still be activity that's required. An investor's interested, but what we do have is an investment completion product, which is a convertible loan note into the company at this stage. So that's the difference between that and the previous 2 grants. It's a convertible loan note to the company. And what this does is it bridge funds the project to get from that inflection point through to the investment completion. And what we're hoping to achieve there is the final materials that are required to get to that investment. So your business plan and your support and financials, the final team in place to actually get there, and a summary of what kind of technical and commercial milestones that you're looking for to basically prove that your opportunity is an investable opportunity. How do you access the support? I think I mentioned earlier on, we don't take applications from academics directly. It must be through your University Technology Transfer Office. So as I said, the relationship managers work very closely. We speak on a monthly basis with the technology transfer and commercialisation offices to scope and support the application process. And it's only upon approval can you proceed to application. And this is because essentially the IP and the ownership of the IP resides with the university at this point. And it's only kind of due process that we kind of go through this route. All applications are competitively assessed, but it's important to note that it's a fully iterative process. So if we do have questions and we do have feedback that we require on that application, we do come back to the teams. We don't just say it's a quick no. There's other funding mechanisms that will pretty much kind of tell you no and kind of leave you to it. We will always give you the opportunity to reassess what we've said and to come back with some more proof points following the diligence that we carry out on that. It's also important to note at this point in time that we don't deal with university startups, so student startups, etc. And that's again because of where the IP resides. It's only university IP that we work with. But again, that's not to say that SE doesn't deal with this, and some of that early stage support that I mentioned, I think in the first or second slide, that can be accessed then back kind of through the SE website, as well as other ecosystem partners that can support that early stage student startup phase. So kind of looking back, I thought that this was kind of quite important to kind of note kind of some of the successes that we've had. So some of you may be aware kind of the proof of concept programme has been around for around about 20 years, but the second iteration of that was the high growth Spinout programme, and that's been around since 2012. In that time, we've funded 73 projects and converted 34. Important to note as well that £28 million pounds of additional R&D funding went into these companies, as well as just shy of £150 million worth of investment. And on top of that, from an ecosystem perspective, 5 Converge winners, and I think it's actually more than 5 runners up. I'll need to check my numbers on that one. But we do appear kind of in the ecosystem partners kind of roll of honour. 2018 Spheres 15 medtech companies, for example, designated it as one of the most promising private companies in the industry. So that was one of our projects. Tech Nation shortlists, 4 out of 5 spinouts highlighted in the recent Eden Scott Young Company Finance Life Sciences report. And then in Bohurst top 15 tech startups. So we do particularly well when we're supporting these companies going through. They are fit for purpose at the end of it and raise investment. And it's important to note that it's certainly possible to do what these other companies have done. And obviously there's a bit of a roll of honour there with some of the companies that you hopefully will recognise that we've worked with. Where we sit right now, we just have about 30 projects right now live, and that will probably be around about 35 by the end of the year. But since 2020, we've supported the spin out of 10 companies, raising around about 20 million. So we're certainly kind of seeing an upward trend in this type of activity. So the spin out success is certainly visible to us. And I thought I would leave you kind of on that kind of challenges and opportunities section. So the route to starting a new company rarely runs smoothly. We've got various challenges along the way, and kind of 2 of the main challenges that I see kind of working in this team now for quite a while is building the right team. So a great idea is great, it's a great starting point, but if you don't have the right team to deliver it, it will just stay as a great idea. And as part of the High Growth Spinout programme, one of the main things that we support the development of is that commercial team by providing a commercial champion to work with the academic teams. So whilst we accept that the academics have a really strong technical leadership and globally recognised experts in their field, delivering on that kind of commercial experience is potentially low, not for everyone, and that commercial champion will kind of come in there and act as a kind of commercial co-founder, an acting CEO to the business as we attempt to kind of bring the whole team up to speed. We do kind of monthly PMG, which is a board meeting, just to kind of get you into that mindset of how a company actually works. And the second thing for me is always expect the unexpected. Nothing ever goes as smoothly as you think. If we kind of take COVID as an example, we completely had to turn this on its head. Investors never done deals without kind of seeing the whites of the person's eyes. And now we can demonstrate that it's possible. But what we need from a high growth spin out perspective is developing plans that have contingencies in them. So really kind of think creatively about how you build that plan and make sure it's fit for purpose. And at that point, then that's where we see the good successes kind of coming out of the other side of it. So that's me, kind of very quick canter through what we do in the High Growth Spin Out programme, but more than happy to take questions now or afterwards. As I said, we've got the relationship managers that work with each of the institutions anyway. So if you do kind of have any burning questions after it, please speak to your technology transfer offices, and then you can kind of get access to us directly from there. But Howell, that's me.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicola. That was really insightful, very interesting as well. It's quite interesting. I was gonna chuck a couple of case studies in as well, but just for time I wouldn't. But you mentioned Novo Sound. I think was one of your spin outs there. And we did there was an innovation venture that we funded with a company called, I think, Snap 40, which was,
Yep.
I think, around sort of understanding, or how that research could be applied in an industry. And I think following that, well, it might not just be because of that, but their route then was to sort of get support with you and go down that Spinout route. So
Yep.
it's there is a really connected landscape out there that works, as long as I think we have those relationships as well, and there's that sort of transparency sometimes in referrals we get. So that's very interesting. Laura, are you okay to come in with any questions that you've
Absolutely.
seen?
And firstly, thank you both. That was really interesting. And there's some positive messages coming through in the chat as well. So I've answered a few questions throughout the chat in terms of the criteria and the eligibility around the kind of funding that Interface administers. So if you're wanting to have a wee look at that, that is there. But to the other questions, Howell, they were kind of real interest around reverse interface, but I think you've kind of gone on and answered that already. So the other question for yourself would be around what you're doing internationally.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We got money through Scottish Government. We've got this really good relationship with the department that sits under Minister Ivan McKee. And we got money, so we at the moment we're getting 100,000 a year. We're putting it into 2 funding calls of 50k each call, and you get up to £10,000 for companies out with Scotland to work with Scottish academia. Really, it's about, I suppose, it's about developing those relationships, those initial relationships, where it helps that company understand better. It might get them some R&D work done here, but also it's about then understanding the landscape, understanding what the talent pool here is in Scotland, and developing those relationships. Can they be speaking to Scottish Enterprise? Can they talk to Scottish Development International and that kind of thing? And it's quite interesting, because I suppose the standard of companies that we've had coming in is pretty high. Some of them are smaller than others, some larger ones that have happened as well, but the sort of actual standards pretty high. And they see Scotland, some of them see it because it's a different market, for example, around things like Scots law is slightly niche, for example. So for them to understand sort of building regs, for example, that's a really good one. So by them actually developing sort of those relationships here, they start to understand that, and actually it is about then basing or posting resource within here. But others as well. There's a couple of them at the moment around sort of decarbonisation of transport, and they're really looking at the tech aspect of it. But they see Scotland as a hotbed because of the remote environment they have. So actually, they're talking to me, but they're already talking to Highlands and Islands, and the Hightrans team up there, because they're trying to understand what the art of the possible if they start to base their technology there. So it's a really, it's a really nice fund that we've got going on. We've got, there's a deadline for the next applications for the 11th of November. If any of you have got anything of interest, I'd probably suggest just come directly to me. We can have a chat about it and see if it's worthwhile, the companies you're dealing with actually applying for this, as it's another, A, it's a good way of getting a project funded, but B, it's also then what can happen from there, really. So hopefully that's okay there, Laura. Is there anything else we want to ask on that?
That sounds good. I have got another question coming for you, but I'm going to go to Nicola. A couple of questions, Nicola. One around full economic costing. And then also how many of the 34 spinouts have had exit funding? So just if you answer around that.
Sure, yeah. I'll take the second question first, because I've got the data. I've got the data up on my screen. We're just about to come out and publish this, so you're probably getting this way kind of too early, and I'll get my knuckles wrapped. But as far as companies that are going to get extended kind of investment funding, kind of beyond that £10 million, we're sitting at 6, almost 7 above the £10 million. I think it's important to note here just how long this takes. This isn't an overnight kind of success story. We kind of very rarely see it, because these are kind of technology intensive opportunities that we've got that require extensive funding. So the most in the last 10 years that we've had is kind of a 35 kind of just almost £36 million inclusive into one of the projects, and then the rest of them are sitting between the 10 and £20 million of kind of Series B type funding. And we've had one exit in that time, but kind of again, watch this space. I think we're kind of coming up to it. But that's again only in the previous 10-year period, because I think if you can remember in the presentation that we say that it's an 8-year runway, kind of from the point of kind of conception. So at that spin-out period, 8 years later, we're expecting you at £5 million turnover or £10 million worth of investment. So we're starting to see that actually the proof in the pudding around about that one. And it's going well. And another thing from an investment perspective right now is we're obviously kind of about to enter into a difficult period as far as investment's concerned. I think we all recognise that that's about to happen, but we're still seeing deals getting done beyond that £2 million level. So it goes to show you get the right team, you get the right product and the right technology and the right market, investment does follow it, and that's pretty much part and parcel of what we do, is identifying those investors that do have that sweet spot in the activity that you're working on, and we can build the bells and whistles around about it, or help you build the bells and whistles around about it. It's certainly not us that do it, it's you guys. As far as the full economic costing of it is concerned, different answer for the two different funding mechanisms. Usually for the opportunity qualification mechanism, that's generally kind of consultant costs. So that's going out and it pays 100% of whatever the cost may be, up to the £75,000. As far as the company creation, where there's potentially academics being paid as part of it, it varies kind of from university to university as to kind of how you kind of either buy yourself out that contract, whatever it may be. But that's a conversation that we kind of have at the university level, is how we can most appropriately fund that project so that there's the value, we're getting the full value out the other side. Hopefully that
Thanks
answers.
so much. Thanks, Nicola. Right, Howell, I've got one more question for you, and depends on how you answer it. You might get time to ask Nicola the question you've got and wrap up. So Colin Pillman's wondering, to what extent is a interface aware of research interests within Scottish universities, and how could this awareness be enhanced?
Thanks, Colin. Coincidentally, when I was talking about putting case studies in, we were going to put a quote from you actually, Colin, and all the work and that sort of relationship that you have with Sunant. So no, thanks for the question. I think there's lots of ways we try to gather the intelligence. Obviously, you know, the landscape's vast and there's so many areas. Interestingly enough, the Net Zero Fund that we had running, that garnered, I think there's about 30 applications that we got for it. So that gave us a bit of a view on the challenges industry are facing. So there's real intelligence there that we could take back to Scotland Food and Drink and the Scottish Government on that side. But actually, who was applying for it as well from an academic viewpoint and what their interests were. So we mapped that. That goes back into our Salesforce, into our big CRM. On top of that, we get, you know, we're doing whatever the number is, 400 odd expertise searches a year. You're getting expressions of interest coming back into our final findings document as well. More and more, we're pushing these into actually putting them into keywords as well that we're doing, and we're sort of developing the profiles of the academics within our system, and making them very current, you know, sort of. So it's really about that intelligence gathering piece. We also internally, we have workshop Wednesdays as well now, where we have sort of certain departments or certain areas. We might have energy technology partnership, for example. They'll come and present about what they're doing and what they're seeing from their perspective as well. So we're gathering intelligence that way. And also as well, we have points of contact within each of the universities. So say I've got Scottish Rural College, for example. I'll chat to their points of contact there. I'll go in there and sort of understand a little bit about what I'm doing. And obviously some of the universities, like the University of Edinburgh, are much bigger beasts, but you know, we've got our points of contact, so we're really on it, really trying to understand and talk to the business development teams, the colleges and the schools as well. But actually, any access that you want to give us to actually understanding further some of these research teams, and I'm sure it'd be the same with Nicola as well. Yep. You know, be more than happy to come out and really understand and get, you know, underneath the bonnet of what you are actually looking at. So,
could I come in on that one if that's okay?
Yeah.
So this is something kind of post-COVID, it kind of started to occur to me that actually we need to be a wee bit more clever about this. That if we're kind of serious about those 7 kind of national programme areas, what research has taken place within our universities that are actually related to that. So we done a bit of work last year on it, and it was fine. It kind of gave us an overview of kind of who's doing what from an IP perspective, but I don't think it went deep enough. So it's certainly something that I'm quite interested in, is to actually kind of get under the skin of how do we kind of see who's doing what, and of what interest is that then to us, kind of from a future economic perspective. So it's a hot topic at the moment. So I would be kind of be keen between kind of interfacing ourselves to kind of match up on that and see kind of how we kind of get to grips with the research interests, as you say, within the Scottish universities, because I think it is important moving forward. Funding is always a premium, so we want to be kind of certain that we're kind of funding the appropriate opportunities that are going to have that disproportionate effect on the economy, and addressing some of those kind of national opportunities as well.
Yeah, and I think just adding to that as well, Alan Wells has just come in from ScotChem, and yeah, he's saying about the research pools as well. And there's certain things, you know, we have certain sector specialisms, but you've got people like Alan who knows inside out what's happening in the chemistry sector. So actually starting to put things down. I put an inquiry to him last week that, you know, he has a better understanding A, of actually what the challenge is sometimes, but also B, then who's working in that field at this particular moment. So as you say, it's about aligning ourselves in that landscape as best as we can. I was just going to finish actually, we were talking there earlier about that, almost that commercial champion, and that event I was at last week where the guy from Skyscanner was speaking, and he was talking about how someone had come to him basically asking for investment so that they could employ someone who would then go and raise further investment. And he turned around and said, well, actually, no, he goes, you're the chief executive of this company. You're the one whose job it is to actually be out there and sort of raising that investment. And I was just wondering, is that do you find that a challenge where, you know, an academic or you know, or Spinout then, you know, this is their lifelong work they're so passionate about they're working on. Do you find that sometimes it's very difficult for them to pass on or understand that their skill set might not sit with the commercial side of things?
Yeah, and I think that's probably kind of one of the main, as I said in my last slide, that's one of the main challenges that we've got, is actually building the commercial team around about the academic founders. And the commercial champion that we've got, I really want to change the name to that kind of commercial co-founder. We really need to kind of find a way of kind of demonstrating that it's not just the technical expertise that we need, but those commercial skill sets and traits that we need that are going to help realise this potential. That's not to say that we don't have some amazing entrepreneurial academics out there who actually do have the skills and expertise and are willing to learn the process. But for those that don't, and there are many that don't, they recognise themselves as kind of the CTO of the business or even an exec chair type person. Some of the responsibility kind of lies with SE and the University Technology Transfer offices to identify that commercial talent that's going to go in and sit alongside that academic leader. One of the biggest kind of problems that we've got there is the marrying of that relationship. That's vitally important. An investor sees through a poor relationship like so easily. So it's probably kind of one of the main kind of sticking points that we've got where we're kind of getting a company to kind of go to that investment round. And it is something that we're working on with the universities and the wider ecosystem partners, is how we get access to more of those commercial individuals to actually come on board as a person within the company, not just a mentor. And I think that's the difference with other kind of mechanisms that are out there in the ecosystem right now. I'm not talking about mentorship here. I'm talking about kind of first person employed within the business.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think we'll probably wrap up there just at the hour mark. So like I say, thank you very much, Nicola. This has been really insightful, really useful for us with the interface, but also hopefully the wider academic landscape here. So thanks very much. We'll follow up with the slides and with the presentations and any links as well that we can put out there. But thanks also to all of you listening today. And as I say, if you have any suggestions for future webinars, please let us know. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you.